Victims of gender-based violence around the world are using social media to reclaim their power and tell their stories. We've seen it with the hashtag #MeToo movement, the Public Roads University reference list of alleged rapists, and most recently with Babes Wodumo. After months of speculation and accusations surrounding the famous couple, singer Babes Wodumo used social media to show the world what she was experiencing in private. That took courage. She posted a live video on Instagram late on Sunday night showing her being assaulted, allegedly by her partner, Mampintsha. The video quickly spread across multiple platforms. It sparked outrage and public debate about gender-based violence. Now, on his release on bail this afternoon, this was Mantla Mampintsha Mapumolo's explanation to the media.
Since from accusation abuse and after the I say certain things I ain't going to party quarter la poor thinking our boss in now of Lalela we are theatre we are because job Molanjang Ugang Pulang we think he caught into Gamong Pulang into that's family Kia Wang pulang into Pam family. So Interanjalo, the Sangi Base is Cassite, Sangwana Mutando Liligash, and some Milligash, if Upepsang I go to Langabarite. Go under influence of child. So isn't doesn't a gilly, one figure of Suga Shire, but Kumum Lomola, Gilel, go on and engine of Sunga 12, Ebuela, we are connected, Wafuang Shire.
So what are the legal and psychological ramifications of exposing violence and crime on social media? Sometimes it appears to be the only way to reveal the abuse. The fear of an abusive partner is all-powerful. Women themselves often don't have the courage to go to the police. So what is the danger of exposing crime on social media? Do our laws help victims, families and friends jump in when they suspect abuse? We have in the studio Kozigiani, clinical psychologist, Verlie Oosthuizen, partner at Shepstone and Wiley, and Megan Harrington-Johnson, partner HJW Attorneys. Now, when we heard that being played out, all of us just cringed, didn't we? The sort of lack of acknowledgement of possibly what went down. I mean, psychologically, what is the impact of watching something like that playing out?
So I think it becomes an assault on even us who are not part of it, because all of us have that adverse reaction to it. And so it continues, the cycle of abuse continues with the rest of us. And part of it is that it goes in two ways, psychologically. On the one hand, it certainly goes a distance in terms of highlighting the plight of people who are exposed to this kind of behavior. But it also, on another level, kind of numbs us, because when we get overexposed to violence, what it does is that in the mind it begins to normalize, and then we, in a sense, become numbed to it, and people can normalize it as part of
is that
this is
also
what
because
happens.
It's the only way to deal with it, is to slightly numb yourself?
Absolutely. There's a sense of helplessness that we can't do anything about it, and therefore just take it in and let it be, and life can continue. You know, so we want to put it out of sight, as it were.
And really, the legal implications, do you think, of exposing this sort of abuse on social media?
Well, I think that there's a big temptation these days to do that. And obviously, we have a criminal justice system that's very slow to work. The courts are clogged. And sometimes people feel that that's their only way of dealing with something. It doesn't stop the fact you can't have trial by social media. If you want to take action against someone, you are going to have to use the legal process. And it's not going to be enough merely to post something like that and then expect the person to go to jail without due process being followed. There is an accused right to...
Inquiries can't get anyone to jail. I mean, that's not going to help.
No, exactly. It might be used as evidence. However, you are going to have to go through the court system. People are going to have to be witnesses. We have a fairly complicated criminal procedure in court, and that is something that we can't avoid.
So let's go back to it being used as evidence. I mean, obviously it'll be played at some stage.
Yes, definitely. But that's not going to be enough. It's going to have to be corroborated. Because obviously, and I would fully anticipate that somebody would turn around and say, oh, but that's fake news. They've doctored the tape. That never happened. They've edited it in a certain way. So obviously, you're going to have to get experts that would be called in, but you would use that tape and then you would have corroboratory evidence.
Now, the man who's been accused, Megan, of abusing her is now saying, actually, he's the abused, he's the victim, she's the one behind this. What sort of impact could that have on the case, and does he... I mean, could that work for him?
Unfortunately, in cases of domestic violence, or fortunately, we generally see counter accusations being leveled, and that simply relates to the nature of the crime and actually what's going on. You know, you're in an intimate partner relationship, tensions are running high, there's passion. Generally, if there's a fight, one person can accuse the other person of assault. So it's not necessarily just a tactic. Maybe there was a fight and he's claiming that he was also being assaulted. We weren't there, we don't know. So the criminal justice system must run its course. The police have an obligation to investigate the complaint. So if he has indeed gone to the police station and laid a complaint, the police must duly investigated. It will then be handed over to the NPA, and the NPA must decide whether or not there's sufficient evidence to prosecute either one or both of the allegations.
If she had been drunk, even if this had happened before, even if she had been abusive, I mean, can he still justify?
There's absolutely no excuse to beating somebody, especially in respect of the defense of self-defense. Whenever a defense of self-defense is used, I'm a little bit skeptical, because you cannot use force that exceeds the force exerted upon you. So, for instance, you can't shoot somebody if somebody hits you. It's an unnecessary exertion of force, and you can only act in defense of your physical person and your life and well-being. And you can see from that video, it wasn't in the moment that he was reacting to immediately defend his life. So it definitely will be used as a defense, and naturally that will be the case in the trial against him, but likely will also happen in the trial against her if he has indeed laid the same type of charges.
Going back to sort of, piling on the abuse, I mean, also, is it quite common that you see that sort of arrogance of actually, I've been wronged and I have all the power, so therefore I will carry on with this game. I will carry on accusing this person, undermining them, knowing that it's worked in the past?
Well, I think there's a social history to this, and that as a community of people, we have, over the different eras of our social lives, had different narratives around the relationship between men and women. And certainly in my context, in our socio-cultural context, I can think back to as recently as in my mother's time, when it was okay. Society... If it was frowned upon, it was in silent corners, in small family meetings, and then hushed. And we have now evolved as a community of people to where we're saying this is totally unacceptable, whether in your private space and especially so in the public space. And so we will react to it differently according to the time where we are. And of course, part of what he is articulating there is a sense of perhaps part of his own upbringing. We don't know what his family circumstances were, what he has witnessed, what he socially has learned in terms of who does what, who has power to do what, and so on, and how relationships between males and females work. And one of his defenses, he said, I cannot allow a woman to beat me up. And that's part of the social scripting. And therefore, I'm justified when pushed to that extent to assert my role as a male. And he says, she does not listen.
Okay, and Verlie, what about the family? I mean, we know that friends were trying to push a case against him. They couldn't do it. Shouldn't that change? Does that mean our law is antiquated?
We have a system of law that has developed over a long period of time, and obviously there are checks and balances. It may seem antiquated, but it is usually so that there is some form of fairness. You can report, but you're actually supposed to have a very very big interest in the case. And it's usually the victim that should be reporting. Obviously, if there's a murder or the person cannot report because they're physically incapacitated, that's different. But the thing is that when you go to court, the victim usually, or a witness, is going to have to testify. And there's no use in the community having an uproar and going and reporting things unless they are going to be able to show that substantial interest in the actual case. And that is going to be a legal question. So it may be that the family would be able to go and report, but if the victim is not going to be willing to testify and is not going to be willing to participate, then it becomes very, very difficult. So when you put up these posts on social media and the community gets into an uproar, and it's not necessarily about a celebrity, it could be about anything, it may be that there is not a substantial enough interest for a person to be able to report it to the police and for charges to be laid. It's usually the victim or someone very, very close to it that would have to lay those charges.
And legally, I mean, I'm just wondering where this leaves those who post videos, social media content. I mean, is this something that would also play out in the court? Would they be called on to possibly stop this sort of thing happening?
Well, legally speaking, as soon as you post something to a social media platform, you are liable for that content as much as the person who initially posted it. So the people sharing the video, et cetera, if that content is proven to be defamatory. So if the video, for instance, is proven to be a fake, then the reposting of it, you could amount to an injury to Papincha's sense of dignity and reputation, which could result in a case of defamation.
Okay, and very briefly, I mean, you see people supporting him when he was talking out, and obviously lots of people are supporting her on social media. Could that play for or against the victim, the perpetrator?
Well, there is always a social divide in that all of us have our own interpretations, and also all of us are socially scripted in some way or other in terms of what our beliefs are, what our values are, what our understanding is in terms of male-female relationships, of power in relationships, or power in the self, and how that power plays out in relationships. There's also mitigating circumstances or aggravating circumstances depending on where you stand on this, alcohol in this case. And it could be used as defense, or it could be used as an aggravating circumstance in this issue.
I suspect we're going to be
always
talking about
divisive.
For a lot longer, as we should. Kosi Gianni, Verlie Oosthuizen, and Megan Harrington-Johnson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gauteng's money, who gets what and why? Coming up, we have Finance MEC Barbara Creasy in the studio.